Coffee in the sanctuary. I'm sorry, but I can just predict some of the emails in response to dealing with this. Slow news day, nothing else to talk about. Sure, there's other things to talk about, but I don't think this is as trivial an issue as maybe it appears to be. Come on, coffee in the worship center, what's the big deal? I think the issue really is not coffee, but ecclesiology. What is church? If you recall from Lee's email, he talked about the Holy of Holies. It was hard to imagine that the high priest would go through the veil to sprinkle the blood on the mercy seat with a giant big gulp of Dr. Pepper, Diet Dr. Pepper, because, having that ooman and thuman and stuff is, you got to be in shape for that. The point is, you say, there's no way the guy would do that because he was doing something set apart, something that was holy, something that was special. Now we've got to ask the question, is the church of today, that building that you go to, I hope every week, is it the same as the temple? And the answer to that is no and yes. No, because it's not the temple. And that was a custom-designed building by God himself, where that annual transaction would take place, and the priests would do their daily work inside of that building. And the church isn't precisely that, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from that they treated that place reverentially, that there was a ceremonial washing in order to do the work of the Lord, that there were systems and programs and words that were to be said and rules that were to be followed, because they were interacting with the God of the universe. What do we do in church? Same thing. We hear from him through preaching of the word, reading of the word, through the ordinances, and we speak to him through prayer and song. Is nothing important happening? Are we doing nothing more than watching a show at the Cineplex? Of course we are. So in that sense, we are like the temple or the tabernacle because of what we're doing. If that's the case, if we remember that we are doing something very privileged as Christians when we assemble together to do all of those things that make a church, that this is something that should not be treated casually. Now, how that applies itself, I think everybody needs to figure that out based on their zip code, socioeconomic status, the history of the church, where they're at, what's going on. We don't make a law where there is no law, but the big point of the coffee conundrum is not about beverages in the sanctuary. It's ecclesiology, my church theology. What is this thing that we are doing? And then we've got to ask ourselves the question, is there any connection between form and function? If my function is that this activity that we're doing together as the assembling of the saints is special, it's unique, it's privileged, it's set up aside, does that show itself in any way? It should. What goes on in your church has a connection back to ecclesiology. What is your church doing for worship? What is the attitude? How casual? How conservative? How strict? Formal is it? What's the music like? Are a lot of jokes being told? Is it more somber? Now remember, you can go into another ditch without any joy, but there should be something that allows you to say, okay, I'm watching the function or the form right there. There's a connection to the function. What you are seeing in church has an ideology or a theology attached to it. What you see manifested during the service tells you what the thinking is. So my encouragement to you, Lee, and anybody else who struggles with being annoyed with coffee in the sanctuary, don't start with that debate. Start with ecclesiology. Figure that out, and when you do, you will have agreement about what you do.